describe a videographer, writer, educator, and webmaster, and he's going to talk about promoting your non-for-profit using video. Kevin?
Thank you. How do you tell the world about your community organization?
Oh no.
I think the earliest record is with the Neanderthals, the cave in Lascaux, France. The cave paintings on the cave walls. We've been trying to communicate about our communities and to our communities forever. But it has been difficult for a long time, and I'll give you a brief history on that. I have been involved in education and communication for about, well, most of my life, 60 plus years of communicating. I'm older than 60 plus years, but I've been doing it for probably 63 or 4 years, working as an educator, trying to facilitate communications and so on. I became involved in videography, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago when the technology, actually 50 years ago, we'll talk about that in a minute. I think I'll need the lights down a bit. Probably around 1963 when the technology became available to us, ordinary mortals beyond Hollywood and New York. And the technology was interesting at that time. I became involved mostly in industry. Usually, to begin with, it was a case of just presenting the information that other people had prepared. In the early 60s, we got cameras as well, and tape decks that we could work with. Like this one, circa 1940, 1964. That was the equivalent of the little microchip in my camera. And it was a poor equivalent. That was about 30 pounds of tape deck. That was only that. The camera was separate. And that was perhaps another 15 to 20 pounds, depending upon what you were using. So there was a lot of incentive not to do that sort of thing back in those days. This was a kind of camera, a studio type camera that was used with, and may still be with some of the TV stations and some of the TV public stations as well. We used that sort of thing when I was trained as a producer with cable vision. And that's heavy. That's about a 15-pound weight on your shoulder, and you want to run around all day carrying those things, shooting people. We have progressed. This was a portable camera and VCR combo, circa 1967. I've said here that it was Olympic women's weightlifting champion Nancy Ludlow carrying it. I made her up. It was just a photo, but it wasn't lightweight. Then, technology began to change even more.
I've been expecting you. That's right, I've been expecting you. I know you don't believe
this was a college video that I could work with.
I've seen it before. You and me here meeting each other. You wonder why? I'll tell you. Because I have a time machine. That's right. I have a time machine.
We were taking the classroom out into the field one way or another.
Travel into the future and see worlds that are quite distant or worlds that may never be. I can go into the past.
As you can see, it's not bad. The video's not bad. The sound's not bad. That was 1970, 1975. But it was a studio working on it, so they had a good college studio working on it.
Doesn't amount to much if we go back 5 or 6 hours in time.
It probably took them about maybe 16 hours or more to put that together once we shot it and put it together. They even built a time machine for me, but we won't see that.
That's not much. I want to take a trip today on the time machine, and I'd like you to...
This one that I did then in the 1980s using a VHS camera recorder, which was probably about an 8-pound device that you could carry around and shoot. You may have used those in your home video production. But compared to the one from the 70s, this is what we got over time.
When the first settlers came into the area that was to become Chicago, this was the highway they used.
Imagine, if you can see it at all, you're doing well. It's a 3rd or 4th generation copy. We had to do it in a linear fashion in those days. It wasn't digital yet, so everything was linear, and it was a nightmare. It took me roughly 90 hours to process a 30-minute video of this sort. And then, as we moved from one VHS cassette to another, you got generation loss over time, so eventually we wound up with things of that sort. This was a handheld digital camera, like your little pocket cameras, right out in front of the Environmental Education Center before it got repainted. The quality is much better, even though that's it was a very small camera. And but we still had problems with things like wind noise and stuff of that sort. And I recognized one of the people there at least, or two. Here I was using a handheld digital camcorder with tape cassette media. That's the one that's back there over near the entrance. Wind noise is a problem. That camera in back is the one that shot this. Problem there was reverberation in the auditorium. So those are all the kinds of things we have to deal with when you're getting out in the field and looking at, are you shooting outdoors? If so, you'll notice on all my cameras now look very fuzzy on top and front. Those are wind screens that I put on after I realized that wind was a nightmare. The wind screens that I use are called wind cutters, and you put them on over the microphones, and they're designed for specific cameras, and they do improve things. They if you've got a hurricane blowing on your camera, you're going to hear it. But if it's a gentle breeze, or even up to a Wolf Lake breeze, sometimes it'll cut it quite a bit. This was 2 cameras. That one, which uses a flash memory, and the one in front that uses tape memory. Their output was combined then later using video editing software. Again, the quality is much better. That's Joanne putting footprints on the sidewalk leading to the art gallery.
My name is Roman Villarreal, and what we're doing.
So all of these, it shows the progression. It's a lot easier. And the basic message of this video is there's not really much justification for not recording what you're doing now. Most of your cameras are capable of at least getting some down and dirty video, and that's not bad stuff. Even the stuff that the regular little still cameras can do is not bad if in an emergency. The cameras that I'm using here are fairly good quality. They're not professional quality, but they're decent quality video cameras. They're better than my capabilities are, so if they don't do well, it's usually because I don't use them well. This is about lost opportunities. It has to do a lot with our kinds of experience in organizations. In 2008, we were in the DC area, and we happened to go to the College Park Air Museum. College Park is the oldest continually operating airport in the world. The Wright brothers had their first factories there for the Army. And that night, Joanne happened to see a poster right in front. I wouldn't have seen it. She saw a poster that's advertised that evening with Aces, with these 2 guys that evening. So we came back and watched it. There were 30 or 40 people in the audience. We were all from the DC area, or tourists from all over the country. Probably had 40 cameras present at least. We had 3, maybe 4 that we could use to record video. And these 2 aces, Admiral Feitner on the right, and the colonel is sitting at the table on the left, is just cut off a little bit, were from the European and Pacific Theater of World War II. They had remarkable stories to tell about their experiences. Now, it doesn't matter whether they got together another time or not. Their stories will be different. That night, their stories were very interesting. And when I went to talk to one of the museum people at the end and said, when can we get a DVD? He said, our cameraman didn't show up. The message was, why the heck didn't you say something? We had enough cameras here to record everything, from every angle in the room. So we had no video of that event. There's a lost moment that will never be retrieved. Use the cameras, take advantage of them. Once you got the video, it's usable. You may not use it today, it's usable tomorrow. But if nobody video records it, it isn't there. What do we need for video work? I've got a handout that tells you all this sort of stuff. But basically, you need a camera, obviously, of some sort. We have different types here. This one is also a still camera. It's a fairly good one, although it's getting old already. And I'll use it for a little bit. Its limitation is 29 minutes. I can run it automatically, but after 29 minutes, it quits. I have a device that I take with me when we go to public places like universities before we plug in to check and make sure that the outlets actually work. We once were putting a display on like this at a university, and the thing was dying out. We didn't realize that the wall we plugged into was turned off on Saturday. We could have checked it, I didn't. So it helps to do that. There are all sorts of things that can get in your way. Basically, that's my presentation. I'm open to questions. I've been doing it for a long time, a lot with Michael. And it's always, it helps to plan in advance, know what you're doing, know what you're trying to get in, have an idea of where you're going to be doing it so you get an idea of how you can set up. Yes, ma'am?
do about permission?
Permission? Public events, I don't require. If it's a public event, I don't require it. If I were doing personal interviews and things like that, then I need to get it.
Okay.
But for a public event, it's a public event. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What type of editing software do you use?
I'm sorry?
What type of editing software?
I work with a Macintosh, so I can use Final Cut Pro, but I'm still learning that. I'm using iMovie right now, and I'm very pleased with it. I've been able to do, again, it's capable of doing more than I'm capable of doing with it. I hope to get better at it. Other questions? There's no reason not to get your community recorded.
Jimmy, did you want to say something about the YouTube videos?
To say something about what there?
About the YouTube videos?
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. I have 144 public videos up now on YouTube. Mostly of things Joanne and I were the staff of the Calumet Stewardship Initiative for about 5 years. And in doing that, we covered all the events that went on. There were hundreds of events that went on, and we got them up there. And we were the only ones who ever put anything up. And we keep asking members, get out there with your cameras, send us stuff. If we're not there to cover you, send us your videos, we'll put them up. Now, once, I think Laura did once. But on that whole 5-year time, nobody did. And that was a tremendous waste of the events we couldn't cover. The events we covered, we usually covered pretty well. So that's the 144 that are up there. Does that say it pretty well? Is that what you wanted to say there? Okay. That's my presentation, folks. Yes, Lynn?
If you're starting out and you are an organization, what kind of camera would you recommend for them to start out with?
I'm using Canons,
Canon?
and I have never had trouble with a Canon. I've used
Digital,
Nikons.
Is digital a better medium?
I'm sorry?
Digital is better or
Well,
not better?
digital is kind of what you will get today. Tape is obsolete now. This tape camera is obsolete. The big ones, now some of the professional cameras still use tape. And they use the micro cassettes like this one does. But for the most part, consumer use is all digital now, or it's a DVD type thing. Don't do that. What I've read generally is if you use the discs, it's not so good. You're better using a flash chip like we're using in this. I can record about 8 hours of video on that. That's more than we'll ever need. You need extra batteries. Always have batteries and have them charged.
And how
What
easy?
other crises did we encounter that we're not talking about that we should have?
Well, that was the first
Power,
crisis.
check your power.
Oh.
The power that you have when you're in a place. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of prices are we talking about?
What kind of?
Prices.
Like if I wanted
much?
to buy...
Oh, okay, this one, I think, when we purchased it, was probably close to $1,000. It would probably, that equivalent now would run probably closer to $500. That one was probably $300 to $500 when it was new. This one was close to $1,000, the Canon G12. It's a heavy-duty camera for a lot of reasons, and the video is only part of it. But it's not the greatest video camera. Canon makes what looked like single-lens reflex, the old single-lens reflex cameras. They make a lot of those that do some great video. Really, I think some fantastic stuff that they do with that. This one does decent video, but it won't zoom in and out. I can zoom in, but it won't come back out when I'm shooting. I'd have to stop it, then zoom out, and shoot again. These cameras will zoom in and out with no trouble. That's not a problem. The newer Canon will do that, but it lacks some features that this one has, so they're trade-offs. I like Canon as a product. I've used Nikon, but the Nikons we used were disappointing, mainly because we chose to use them with AA batteries rather than corporate batteries, the kind that goes with the camera, because sometimes those go out of business. We had a Dimage camera for a long time. Well, Dimage is totally out of business, so Minolta is out of business. Getting batteries for it gets to be a challenge. AA's will be around for a long time. Well, the problem with it is that when we use lithium cells with the Nikon, you take about 2 shots and it says your batteries are out. But that's stupid. These batteries are good for a week, come on. But the camera goes crazy with them. So I don't like Nikon for that reason, only because of the power that we chose. I still like to have it though when I'm on the road and need something I can put batteries in very quickly from any place. Other questions?
Where do you get good deals on these?
Well, J&R Computing in New York is where I've usually gone. We've been using them since the first thing we did, that video movie about when first settlers came into the region, that one that you can barely see on the screen. We did that in '88. We got drafted to do a video project for a Cablevision station. And so I had to go out and buy a camera, buy editing equipment and everything else. We got the camera locally, and then I found out that there's only a linear editor at that time, and it was available through J&R in New York. I've been using them ever since. They are fantastic. Their prices are always good, delivery is good, service is good. And so I've just, J&R Computers is what but it's J&R cameras, J&R everything. It's in Long Island, their primary location. But they're on the way. Just do jnr.com and you'll find them. You know, there are tons of places out there you can buy them. But do a Google search and get your best price. I stick with J&R. Other questions? Yes, Liz?
When you're filming an event, do you have any tips for someone who's new at recording an event? Some things you could...
You mean how to set up and things like that?
Advice, yeah.
From all my mistakes, yeah. Try to shoot so that you're not shooting with a bright light in the camera. Sometimes, to get your subject, you may not be able to avoid that. But if you can arrange yourself so that the light's falling on the subject and not on your lens, that's very good. I had a situation recently where we did our historical society, and for physical reasons, I couldn't get into the far end of the room. So I wound up getting the presenter at the back of his head mostly, and part of the screen that he was showing things on. But the alternative would have been to be shooting right into the light from the other side, so I was stuck with that. It was either that or have so much glare that you might not be able to see the image clearly anyway. So try to, what's your lighting? Try to have the lighting fall on the subject and not on your lens is a basic rule I'd say to be concerned about. Try to think about the way that, visually, how does it look to an audience? What do you want to include? When I'm shooting this, I was hoping to get, with this camera, my presentation, because we'll use that. We try to give presenters as much as possible on the YouTube site. But I also want to get you in your questioning and so forth. So that camera is trying to do that. This one also will a bit. I'll try to put all those together and get a balanced video that shows us doing this today. I hope that with the lighting and everything else, it'll all come out right. We'll see when I edit it. Yeah. Editing is always the revelation for me.
What's the cost of the editing software? You mentioned several that you
Okay,
use.
Final Cut Pro used to cost an arm and a leg. It was a couple of $1,000s, I think, at one time. And Apple finally said, maybe we should come down. So right now it's a couple hundred.
Oh.
iMovie is much cheaper, and it's a good starting place. If you're using a Mac. If you're using a PC, I haven't a clue. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you're using a PC, I could recommend Adobe Premiere Elements, roughly $100. It's almost as good as Adobe Premiere, which is hundreds of dollars. But Elements is, yeah, Elements just does a really wonderful job for $100. You may be able to even get it for less.
Other questions? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.